Hi, I'm Susie at Susie Holbrook Astrology, and I'm talking today about the 10th archetype, which is Saturn and Capricorn and the 10th house. And remember, we've come from the 9th archetype, and this is about our faith and our potential. And in that archetype, we're nearly godlike. The sky's the limit, and we really are not human and not bound by limits, the limits of this earthly plane in the 9th archetype. And so we go for it. And in that process, we might cross some boundaries that are, crossing over beyond what is the right thing to do because we don't know and we're learning. And anything is possible in that archetype. And in the 10th archetype now, there is a reckoning, and we're learning about where those lines are drawn. So wherever our 9th archetype symbols in our chart have led us from past lifetimes into this lifetime, and where we're learning how far we can go, in the 10th, this is the point at which we can no longer push. This is the boundary that we all are held to in accordance with. And so it's about understanding right and wrong in some way. There's that black and white line beyond which there is karma accrued. All these are good Capricornian, Saturn, 10th archetype words. It's about the laws, and whether the laws are man-made, which are cultural and relative, or whether they're spiritually made, which are something that all of us are held accountable to. That is this archetype. It's also about our upbringing and about the structures that we have been taught. It's about tradition. It's about the teachers that we have. What kind of a role model do we gravitate toward? What kind of role model do we want to be? What kind of structures are we held to in this life? That is our karmic inheritance from past lifetimes, potentially, if you buy into that, which I do, into this lifetime. So that can be discerned from our natal signature, this 10th archetype. Now, morality, karma, those things are very loaded words. We have to be very careful when we talk about this. When we look at it for ourselves, we need to have kindness in our heart whenever we talk about this Capricornian kind of idea, because you can lay it on too thick and put that on somebody else, or we can take it on our own shoulders in too big a way, because this archetype describes guilt. It describes maybe guilt that is righteous and guilt that we should learn from. And it also describes guilt that can be pushed upon us from an authority that was not good. And so we can see that from past lifetimes as well. It can show in a natal chart being a victim of trauma and abuse and potentially torture. That, especially when it's layered on with an Aries Mars kind of dual signature, can be about that, carrying that in our body. It can be about the direction our life should take for our own moral health, the direction that we need to assume in order to do what we need to do to walk our moral path. It's about walking and talking consistently. That we want to, from inside to out, be who we are, and not to talk one way and act another. So that consistency of approach, not being hypocritical, that is very, very 10th archetype. So if we look at in the body the kind of things that we can see from a medical astrology perspective, it's about all kind of structures. That's what we're talking about with this archetype. the kind of tradition we're growing up with, the kind of rules that we live our life by. It's also about the structure in the body, the skeleton, so the health of the bones. It's about the minerals that we need for many processes in our metabolism: calcium, magnesium, phosphorus. It's about vitamin D, which has many functions, but it's also functioning to help create a strong skeleton. It's about the gut barrier, which is the gut microbiome, the health of that in creating that structure of the gut barrier. Because if we don't have that, it puts us at risk for many disease processes like autoimmunity, but foundationally we need that healthy gut, which goes back to what we eat, goes back to how healthy are we living our life, which is about the structure of our life. Are we providing enough structure in our life to have a healthy function? It's about the blood-brain barrier. It's about the skin, the boundary between external and inside, the skin, and it's about all kind of crystallization processes in the body. So like creation of gallstones, that is a 10th archetype process. Scarring is a 10th archetype process. Any kind of fibrosis in the body, that is this archetype. It describes potentially some kind of restriction. So if there is intrauterine growth restriction, then there's probably a Saturnian element or a 10th archetype process involved. If it's about a child that's not growing as well, then that, in general, then that is a Saturnian 10th archetype process. Any like organ that is too small, like for example, if there is a small skeleton, like achondroplastic dwarfs, there could be featured heavily this Saturnian element. A lot of times it's the whole Capricorn-Cancer 4th, 10th archetype axis, but that could be figurative in that kind of process. There is co-rulership with the thyroid gland. The thyroid elaborates thyroid hormone, which is a growth hormone. So this is very important in development and growth of a child. And it also in adulthood is very active in keeping our body healthy and in metabolism of our body in general. And it has to do with the end of the digestive system, which is the rectum, the anus. A lot of times people are said to be, tight sphinctered, like they're very into the rules and following the law, and maybe to a fault. And so that, that tight sphincter, that's kind of referencing this issue. And it also has to do with depression. It's co-ruled with manic depression, but depression in general is a Saturnian 10th archetype kind of process. Now, interesting that there is a degree of reflection necessary in depression because we need to evaluate what's not working anymore. So depression's not always, it can be used for a positive result, but obviously I'm somebody that thinks that it can also be assumed from past lifetimes that, that you've had this imprinting coming in, that you've done something wrong, that you're not right, and that there can be a whole layer of depression from that assumed projection from other people in past lifetimes that can be not your fault. But so there's always that element in Capricorn 10th archetype having to do with looking. Is it true guilt? Has there really been some law that's been transgressed? Or is it assumed guilt, projected guilt, and not something that you've really done? Very important this thing to discriminate from a natal chart. And like I mentioned, it could be injury that is felt physically in the body. Now, let's look at a couple charts here. there is one that I want to review is Denzel Washington. Denzel Washington is an actor, and to me, he always comes across as being about uh, the upright moral stance. You know, a lot of his shows are about morality. You know, there was Malcolm X, you know, that there's also times like the recent part he played in the Gladiator, the second one. You know, he's actually the bad guy in it. So there is a lot that he brings to life about my moral path there in the characters that he plays. He always, to me, comes across as very trustworthy when that's the part he's playing. But some statement about that. He himself was raised by a Pentecostal Christian minister, his father. And so he himself is a Pentecostal Christian. So that's fascinating to me because there's that issue there about right and wrong, you know, and about looking to an external source for telling us how we should behave and how important that is to him on his path. And like I say, we all, in wherever our Saturn or Capricorn is in our chart, we come face to face with this issue of morality. And I was reading about him, and it said that he, to this day, questions whether his path of being an actor is really the right path for him, because he feels himself to be a preacher, and that maybe he's taking the easy way out or shirking his responsibility. All those things are good 10th archetype kind of questions to ask ourselves, which is such a huge part of Denzel Washington's path, with his sun in Capricorn conjunct the North Node in Capricorn there, you know, about my path of morality, you know, my path that is walking my talk. And so just a fascinating bit there. I read that he states as a child he was on a path of kind of moral questionable morality, because he grew up poor and in gangs. And I think it was at 14, right when actually Saturn was crossing over on the descendant there, crossing over from the 6th to the 7th house. So a very prominent transiting position, and it was squaring his own sun. A question about what is right, and he was started in a school that gave him a moral compass, that gave him role model, and so highlighting this process for him in his own life, and taking up that mantle of being the moral compass. So another chart I wanted to talk about is Kate Middleton. She is she's married to the son of the King of England, and is the mother bringing in these princes that will go on to become the King of England. And she is born with Sun in Capricorn conjunct the South Node in Capricorn, and her moon is in Cancer conjunct the North Node. So what this is saying is that she was born on a lunar eclipse, which is fascinating, being that she is royalty, which this signature is really common in royalty, and also that she is the gate, you know, the physical gate for bringing in these souls that are royalty. And so a huge statement there about tradition, a huge statement about child raising, and about providing the structure necessary for these souls. So the Capricorn-Cancer axis is it's the epitome of developmental process. It's the epitome of having a supporting environment for allowing the development of a healthy emotional base and giving time to grow and feel nourished and nurtured. That's the Cancer, her moon in Cancer. And the Capricorn is, yeah, I do need to provide you space and the time to develop, but there's also a point at which the boundary is made and we have to measure up and we have to grow up, and there are traditions that we have to uphold. So this kind of process is huge for Kate Middleton. And we also see her a square to her own Saturn in Libra. So in her own process, that she does tend to really feel very bound by tradition, bound by the rules that she must carry forward. And that can be a bit confining. And that Saturn squaring is reminding her that there needs to be leniency for what comes in the moment. That's that third house. What are we learning in the moment? What are we listening to, Libra? And learning from new messages, new voice, new ideas that are coming in. So she's this mix of not only the tradition, but standing up to what needs to change in order to be current. And a fascinating, kind of synthesis there. So she's somebody, as far as the medical astrology, had a diagnosis of cancer in January of 2024. And she underwent abdominal surgery. And we don't know what kind of cancer, but if we look at this transiting planets around her own natal chart, we see South Node transiting South Node in Libra, right conjunct that Saturn in Libra. And that was squaring her own South Node, North Node axis and her Sun. So something there that was challenging her vitality, Sun. And we see also that the ruler of her sixth house. So in order to delineate her medical astrology potential concerns with her health, we have sixth house, which is Virgo house, about health. Saturn there is the ruler of that sixth house. So how poignant a symbol. Her own Saturn, ruler of her sixth house, and that South Node coming up to bring in issues. I imagine that this was really important for her, something to communicate, third house, something that she could not keep inside in order to be healthy. She couldn't just shove it down, which is the way that sometimes these Capricornian people, don't ruffle the waters, just, some don't, sometimes work takes precedent. Sometimes her role takes precedent, but this time she had to speak up. And then that Pluto in Capricorn going into her sixth house there, and that was squaring her own natal Pluto there. And that South Node was transiting South Node, going over her own Pluto. So all symbols of potentially of a cancer diagnosis. Potentially, we don't know for sure what type of cancer, but we can see that as a statement through that time in her process. So Capricorn-Saturn-10th archetype, about the rules, about moral choice, about karma, about guilt, projected versus natural, and all these very foundational, important subjects that if you have any questions, you want any help in looking at your own chart, I'm definitely available, and please join my channel. So I'm Susie at Susie Holbrook Astrology. Thanks so much.